So recently we've talked a lot about this misinformation machine. And for those of you who might be like, what is that? How does it look? I want to show you. You hear a lot about the effect that Joe Rogan played in this election. Oh, the left needs their Joe Rogan. And Rogan was one of the biggest cogs in this misinformation machine I talk about. So I wanted to highlight how it looks in real time and go over the effect that it might have on the right's outlook of the government by watching this right-wing tech bro rich guy, Marc Andreesen, completely lie about one of the most efficient and beneficial agencies we have in the CFPB. And Rogan doesn't push back once, doesn't ask any critical questions, no follow-ups, and instead chooses to just platform these massive lies. So let's watch and then fact check.
Thing called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, CFPB, which was it's sort of Elizabeth Warren's personal agency that she gets to control. And it's an independent agency that just gets to run and do whatever it wants, right? And if you read the Constitution, like there is no such thing as an independent agency, and yet there it is.
What does her agency do?
Whatever she wants.
What does it do, though?
Basically, terrorize financial institutions, prevent fintech, prevent new competition, new startups that want to compete with the big banks.
Really?
Oh yeah, 100%.
How so?
Just by terrorizing anybody who tries to do anything new in financial services. And
can you give me an example?
Well, debanking. This is where a lot of the debanking comes from, is these agencies. So debanking is when you as either a person or your company are literally kicked out of the banking system.
Like they did to Kanye.
Exactly, like they did to Kanye. My partner Ben's father has been debanked.
Really?
We had an employee who
what?
For having the wrong politics, for saying unacceptable things.
He's hesitant to actually say what the CFPB does here because its actual cause is to protect consumers from being defrauded by financial institutions, something that any non-investor should enjoy, these kinds of protections. The reason that guys like him in this clip, like Elon and Vivek, the guys who are going to be in charge of possibly cutting funding to agencies like this, why they don't like the CFPB is because it protects consumers against scams that they themselves profit massively from, like a fintech that this guy in the clip, his investment company backed LendUp, that lied about loan terms, broke legal orders, and failed to explain credit denials, stealing millions, or I think it was even billions of dollars from consumers that the CFPB was able to sue them and get returned, which explains why he personally doesn't like this agency and is now speaking out against them with a vendetta. Of course, that context he doesn't provide in this interview, but there's many other rich guys who want to be able to scam the working class as well, and two of them, Elon and Vivek, possibly are going to be able to get rid of agencies like this and make it a lot easier for them to do so. And this guy's also lying about debanking. The CFPB is actually one of the strongest fighters against debanking. It's opened multiple lawsuits against banks that it feels are wrongly doing this, especially for religious or political reasons. And it's Senate Democrats who are fighting to approve protections from this. So it's kind of weird to think that this is something the left is doing to the right and that they aren't affected by, when it's again Senate Democrats trying to stop this from being able to happen. In reality, the CFPB is one of the most efficient agencies we have. It returns over $20 billion a year to consumers for less than $1 billion a year to operate.
There's now a category called a politically exposed person, PEP. And if you are a PEP, you are required by financial regulators to kick them off of to kick them out of your bank.
What?
You're not allowed to have
What if you're politically on the left?
Well, that's fine.
No.
because they're not politically exposed.
So no one on the left gets debanked?
I have not heard of a single instance of anybody on the left getting debanked.
Can you tell me what the person that did, what they said that got them debanked?
Oh, well, David Horowitz is a right wing. He's pro-Trump. He said all kinds of things. He's been very anti-Islamic terrorism. He's been very worried about migration, all these things.
And they debanked him for that.
Yeah, they debanked it. So you get kicked out of your bank account. You get kicked out of you can't do credit card transactions. But by the way, you can't.
How is that legal?
Well, exactly. So this is the thing, and then you go in this thing of this is where the government and the companies get intertwined. Back to your fascism point, which is there's a constitutional amendment that says the government can't restrict your speech, but there's no constitutional amendment that says the government can't debank you.
I know you'll be surprised to find that this is entirely false and made up as well. It's the ultimate cope for Republicans to want to be the victim this bad that they're pretending they aren't even allowed to bank anymore. At what point does it stop? These clowns literally bank, pun intended, they bank on the fact that their base won't research anything at all. A politically exposed person refers to an elected official, a politician who, because of their position, may be at risk for corruption. And even in that what a PEP actually is, not like voters or people who just support Trump, even what those people actually are, banks aren't required to kick them out. either. He's lying on both fronts here about what they are and what happens to him, right? As you can read in full on your own, if you just search FFIEC, politically exposed person, you could pull up the document yourself, but they are just to monitor and scrutinize this person to determine the level of risk that they specifically will provide. And even then, they're just to put measures in place to guard against that risk. They don't have to kick them out at all, right? This is something that all major countries do, by the way. It's normal for banking, and it happens to both sides of the aisle. It's just politically exposed persons. And again, it's not just people who vote one way or the other. It's not people who openly support Trump that are getting debanked. It's propaganda, again, going unchecked by Joe Rogan, so his listeners will accept it as fact. This is how you manufacture this kind of mistrust of the government and their agencies, because it's just people now being force-fed things that they don't understand, that this is now their understanding of it, but it's all lies.
This has been happening to all the crypto entrepreneurs in the last 4 years. This has been happening to a lot of the fintech entrepreneurs, anybody trying to start any kind of new banking service, because they're trying to protect the big banks. And then this has been happening, by the way, also in legal fields of economic activity that they don't like. And so a lot of this started about 15 years ago with this thing called Operation Choke Point, where they decided to, as marijuana started to become legal, as prostitution started to become legal, and then guns, which there's always a fight about. Under the Obama administration, they started to debank legal marijuana businesses, escort businesses, and then gun shops, just like your gun manufacturers, and just like you're done, you're out of the banking system. And so if you're running a medical marijuana dispensary in 2012, like you, guess what? You're doing your business all in cash, because you literally can't get a bank account. You can't get a Visa terminal. You can't process transactions. You can't do payroll. You can't do direct deposit. You can't get insurance. Like none of that stuff is, you've been sanctioned, right? None of that stuff is available. And then this administration extended that concept to apply it to tech founders, crypto founders, and then just generally political opponents.
I just really want to be able to help anyone watching this to be able to pick up on nonsense like this. Notice how he's being pretty vague the entire time he's speaking. He's never giving specific examples, names, amounts, reasons, context, right? He's just saying this scary thing over here is happening. Even when Joe asks him, like, how does this happen? Or what's the specific thing? He just goes on to the next vague rant. There's no specifics. When people are never providing details and purposefully being vague, when they're always alluding to something that they're never willing to explain, it's very likely that they're lying, either partially or in full. And it's context, right? That's kind of where you get caught up when you're lying. And if this was something that was really happening and was running rampant unfairly, these people would have tons of evidence. Like that would be the first thing that you bring, right? If something happened to me, the first thing I'm going to do is provide the evidence that it happened. I'm not just going to be like, oh my God, this thing is happening, but nobody's talking about it, right? There would be whistleblowers, right? Things would be showed, exposed. It's people like this guy who try and scam the middle class and get caught. And now that they have to hate agencies like this, that because they protect the consumer and, it stops them from enriching themselves, they want to brainwash you into being like, feeling like their hatred for that agency is relatable when it's totally not. And this is exactly what Elon and Vivek will be targeting with Doge, is agencies just like this that protect you and stop them from enriching themselves, right? It's the richest man in the world, and Vivek, who has like sold scammy medicine and stuff. Like it's so the rich can keep getting richer while the poor continue to be scammed. And the worst part about it is that half the targets susceptible to these scams will be cheering on Elon removing these agencies and these kinds of protections because of the misinformation machine that we're talking about right here, with interviews just like this, where rich guys can come in and complain about the government and say it's corrupt and it's against you, and they're not getting checked or questioned at all by the interview. So the listeners then feel relatable to this. They feel like they're gaining some sort of understanding, like, oh, this guy's letting me know, like this rich guy's letting me know like the ins and outs of the government, right? And they then develop this mistrust of the government, when in reality, the whole time this was manufactured upon you by some guy who wants to weaken the government because the government is protecting you from the scams that he wants to do to you to enrich himself.